Hello, I'm Lucas, this is a bit of late, and I'd like to talk about what I've read since the beginning of the month. A lot of these have been shorter pieces, so it's not too shocking, but it has been a very good month so far for me to read the last week. I've read quite a few books, and I'll just talk about them quickly. The first three were about animals. Not the first three, but the last three have been about animals, but the first three I'll talk about. The first one is Aloft, a meditation of pigeons, pigeon flying, and pigeon flying by Stephen Visio, and it's sort of a memoir about his relationship with pigeons, all about pigeons, what they are, what they do, and all this other stuff. It's very short, it's about 60 pages. Kind of more of an essay than anything, very long essay. Yeah, it was interesting. I didn't really care about Stephen himself. This is the first book I've ever read like this, and yeah, I don't really care too much to read about people's relationships with their sport, because the pigeon flying, I thought that was a little weird. How when it started talking about breeding pigeons and how these people would try to gauge if they're gonna create good children. But there it is. Animals and Psychedelics, The Natural World and the Instinct to Alter Consciousness by Giorgio samorini. Again, well, this one is like 80 pages, and 20 of them were notes. 87 pages, maybe 90 pages. I don't know. 20 of them were just notes in the bibliography and that kind of thing. But yeah, it just talked about how animals get inebriated and how, and I had a lot of questions as to why. Perhaps it's an instinctual thing, in the sense that, like some mandrills, when they want to go challenge some people, they'll eat this really bitter root and wait a little while, and then they'll be ready to take them on after the roots, whatever's inside of it, alkaloids or whatever, take effect in the brain, sort of give it more confidence, sort of releases the brain's inhibitions and the instinctual inhibitions, and opens up a new world. That kind of makes sense. And it talks about that for different animals too. That's just the one at the top of my mind. Kind of dry reading. I thought it'd be more interesting, but it was like, oh, elephants do this too. Oh, insects do this too. Oh, goats do this too. Okay. Not that engaging. And then I read by Elizabeth Marshall Thomas and Cy Montgomery, a collection of essays called Tamed and Untamed, Close Encounters of the Animal Kind, which I really enjoyed. More so the essays by Cy Montgomery. The ones by Elizabeth Marshall Thomas, I don't know, I wasn't feeling it as much. There were some that were good, but there was one about ESP, and she gave this anecdotal story. She didn't say it was real, but she just, if it is, then animals have it, and we have it, and animals have it too. And there's another essay about some kittens being abandoned on the side of the road, and I liked that essay, but there was one moment where she's trying to figure out why these people abandoned these kittens to die, and as she says, they were careless and reckless, and it wasn't very nice, to say the least. It wasn't a good thing to do, when there were so many options that they could have taken. But she assumes that they must be on drugs. They could have sold the kittens for drugs, which must be the reason why they were so heartless. And maybe, but I don't know where you got that from. Just a minor thing. The essays by Cy Montgomery were like amazing. In this book, I mean, it's got every kind of animal: pigs, birds, dogs, cats, earthworms, water bears, just anything you can think of. There were a lot of really wonderful essays, and I'm interested to read more by Cy Montgomery. Not so much by her best friend, best human friend at least, Elizabeth Marshall Thomas. I know she's going to be mentioned in some other Cy Montgomery books, so we'll see how that goes. Not a big fan. Not as big a fan as I am of Cy Montgomery, just from this. This is my first book with her writing in it that I've read, and it was great. Elizabeth, I'm not opposed. There were other quibbles, but those two that I brought up were my main ones. And then for maybe Midrash, I read 2 works by John Milton, and I will be reading more works by men named John, namely John Steinbeck, and then some nonfiction, which I have yet to figure out. But I read Samson Agonistes and Paradise Regained, which are sort of paired together, or they were when they were published. And Paradise Regained is kind of a sequel to Paradise Lost, where it's based on the Gospel of Luke's account of Satan trying to tempt Jesus in the desert. And it's really very different from Paradise Lost, but it is still it's an interesting poem, to say the least. There's a lot to think about. And then Samson Agonistes tells the story of the character from Judges, Samson. And it's near the end of his life, after he's lost his hair, and up to the point where he destroys everything. And there's a little bit after, because we follow different characters at that point. And yeah, it's really misogynist, as is Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained and everything else Milton ever wrote, probably, which is really hard to get by, but it's an interesting drama. It was a closet play, so it was never meant to be performed. I read those. They were interesting, I guess. Anyway, of the 2, I would recommend Paradise Regained. It's a lot easier to read, but Samson Agonistes is a little more dramatic because it is a drama. So, let's see. Oh, and for Friday Fantasy, I read Reaper Man by Terry Pratchett, which is the 11th book in the Discworld series, and it is the 2nd book following Death, after Mort, which is the 4th book, which is the first book that follows Death. So yeah, I read the sequel, sort of, in the Discworld that follows the Death character. And I will give a raving review for that book for Friday, because it's magical. Definitely really, really loved the parts with Death. And the other characters, Wendell Poons and the Arch-Chancellor and something Reg. I'm forgetting some of the names. I'll have to write them down. But I really liked that too. It was really fun and goofy, but it was a little bit too much, and I often found myself wanting to read more about Death, which I loved the part about Death, which is interesting because in Mort, I was equally engaged with Mort and with Death and Princess Kelly and the wizard that they make friends with. I'm forgetting his name, but Death's not partner, his live-in help kind of the name came to me, but really high praise for Reaper Man coming soon, and Terry Pratchett in general. And as for the last 2 books I read Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erikson, book 1 of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. I thought I would finish it the last day of April, but I finished it technically in the wee morning hours of May, and it is a difficult read. You're put into this world, you land, and then you have to run and sprint to catch up to what's going on. But once you do, It's really engaging. It's about an empire at war trying to take these two cities, Pale and Darujistan, if I remember the name correctly. There's all kinds of interesting species. There's a species that lives on this moon-like thing that floats above Pale and later elsewhere. And there's undead species, and there's mages, and there's puppets that have been soul dispossessed from other people, from other mages. Like the soul of a person who was dying was transferred, and that happens a lot. And there's just a lot of stuff going on. I've read most of these, or I've made a video for most of these, so I will leave a link to all of them later. And then, of course, I read Absalom by William Faulkner, because Codex Cantina has been reading and going through it and giving a great comprehensive discussion about it. There's a lot of things I really like about it, and there's a lot of things that I don't like. I think I still find that there's a certain point, I talk about it more in my review, but there's a certain point where the drama centers around, and it feels like such a coincidence that this event happened, that the drama could then take place to reveal all the ugly truths that William Faulkner is trying to get to. I mean, things were shaky before then, and then this event happens, and then everything falls apart. And everything falling apart is engaging, but yeah, the way it's written is just really hard to read, and I still feel like this is too much of a coincidence. I've been looking into it and discussing with them a little about how or why this happened, and I don't really buy it. I just think it's coincidental to serve the theme rather than the plot and the characters and all that stuff. So yeah, it's an interesting book. It's really hard to read. That's all I've got. As for what I'll be reading in the future, I've got some ideas. I'll make a video for that maybe Saturday or something, because I've got a little bit of a haul. So yeah, gotta wait for that. So thank you, bye.